Welcome to Foundation episode number 3. If you'd like to get this early, sign up for the email newsletter at the URL below. But now, let's talk to Philip Rosedale, who's the founder of Second Life.
Good? All right. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in San Diego. I was born there, and my dad was a Navy pilot, so I moved around a little bit, but came back to San Diego, went to college there.
Nice. Computer science?
Yeah. Well, sorry, I started doing computers when I was a kid. I took some computer science classes at UC San Diego, and then I switched my major to physics. Because I'd always had an interest, I was always very mechanical and into electronics, and I thought that physics was the most interesting degree, and of course, you know, it gave me a lot of peripheral stuff to computer science.
So were you coding as a kid then?
I started coding, I think I had a Timex Sinclair, ZX80 based Sinclair, and I programmed in BASIC on that, and then I got an Apple IIe, and then I remember like there was a key combination that got you into the assembler on the Apple, and I found that key combination, and you know, then I started programming in assembly language.
Did you, so you knew how to program in assembly language back then? How old were you?
Well, I was, boy,
that's hardcore stuff.
That was, yeah, well, what happened was I was writing in Scientific American. There was a really cool program that was cellular automata. It was an early Stephen Wolfram, one of these like, you know, beautiful like little trees, you know, automata creation, little crystal looking things. And I wrote it in BASIC. I was always very practical. I wasn't like into programming really like for the learn the language sake. I just wanted to like make cool stuff.
Yeah.
And so I wrote it in BASIC, and it was incredibly slow. Like on the Apple IIe, it was like zzz, zzz, you know, lines coming down the screen like old, you know, character graphics.
Right.
And so I was like, man, there's got to be a way to do this faster on this computer.
Well, it was all uncompiled code, right?
Right, and it was basic, and it was interpreted. You know, it was super slow. So, but there was this button on the Apple. There was like 3 keys that you would just hit, and it would go boop, and it would put you into the assembler, and then you could just program an assembly language. And so, the first assembly language programming I did was that, and I was, I think I was in like 7th grade or 8th grade.
That's amazing.
Something like that.
So, did you have like the math background? I mean, how did you learn how to jump into assembly?
Well, I mean, you know, I never, later certainly I did lots of math with physics, but I've never really considered myself like a...
Algorithm guy, or?
Yeah, I've always considered myself more of a, you know, structures and abstractions kind of guy, more so than like a hardcore math, like proofs. Mm-hmm. So I had a little bit of a math background as a kid, but it was self-taught. I mean, I think programming mostly, even the kind of assembler I was doing then, you need to use numbers to represent symbols or operations, you know, but you still don't really need to do a whole lot of math. And besides, you've got, you know, add and multiply built into the assembly language calls.
It's crazy. So you're into computers, you're excited about that. You started going to college. Had you started your first job yet? Had you started actually working in the tech industry?
Yeah, my first, I started programming, and I'm trying to remember, I started tutoring kids when I was in high school. I would tutor like younger kids, teaching them how to program. Because, you know, back then, this was 19, you know, giving away my age, this was like 1984, right? And so I was tutoring kids, so, you know, people for the most part didn't do programming, but I thought programming was cool, and I liked tutoring, and so I would tutor kids to teach them how to program. And so I programmed a lot on my own just for fun, but what happened was I met a guy who had a car dealership, and I wrote a database software program using DBase and then Fox Pro for anybody who remembers that.
I do remember that.
And I wrote this database, ran it on a PC, and connected it with an ArcNet, a BNC-based network back then, which was, I think it used Novell as the file system or something. Way back.
Wait, BNC, was that the, that was the little like cable, like you had the connectors, you had to close
BNC cables, and you had to put the T little terminators
the terminator
on it.
The terminator was off.
Reflect, or it would totally not work. Yeah. And it was what? It was like 4 megabits or something.
Yeah.
Something like, or 1 megabit. 1 megabit.
Yeah,
I think the old one was 1 megabit.
Because then they came out with the 10 megabit cards. Yeah.
I wasn't even, I was off at college for that, I think. But so I did this programming, and I wrote a big piece of database software that worked on a few networked PCs. I mean, this is before the internet. Before the internet, we all know. And I started selling it to businesses, and so that was my first business. So I started that. I started like formally. I made my little company, I think when I was like 16 going on 17.
That's crazy.
And then all through college I did that.
So you were just cold calling and kind of knocking on doors and being like, hey, I got this application.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, do these people even know what software was at the time? They probably didn't know how to use a computer hardly, or...
You know, it was really funny. I was competing with those old green screen terminals. So these car dealerships would have, because actually selling cars to people involves like a tremendous amount of forms and calculations, right? You know, if you've bought a car, right, you got to sign your name.
It's all, I mean, I've bought one too long ago, and it's a big long.
Yeah, it takes a half an hour
Yeah.
to do it. So that process is hard, and back then it was terribly hard because there were no computers to print out the forms, so you had to handwrite the forms.
Oh, crazy.
So I was basically selling stuff that would do this, but the car dealerships, the new car dealerships would have these like $500,000 mini computers. So I mean, it's going back to like Computer History Museum, that had these green screen terminals where, you know, they do everything on these terminals. And so I went in and I was like, man, these guys are paying like $250,000, $500,000. I'll build them something for $10,000, you know, and I'll make a good amount of money for myself. And so that's what I did. It was pretty easy. I'd walk in and pitch people on it, and then set it up. And I had a pager, you know, and I'd go and run out to their dealership if something went wrong.
Yeah. So this took you through college.
Yeah.
And then leading up to Second Life, any other startups in between then, or?
Well, when I moved up here to San Francisco, not here where we are, which is near Hayes Valley, but down by the Caltrain station south of Market. I just by chance moved my little company. It was just me when I came up here to San Francisco in 1994. I just by chance moved into a little office down at the Caltrain station that had these 4 guys right next door to me, just by chance, who were starting up an ISP called Sirius, which was one of the old school first, you know, kind of solo San Francisco ISPs. And
this
they
was
told
like, this is the internet was just taking off,
this
right?
was 94.
Yeah.
So I mean, for the people who were in the know, they know.
Right.
But yes,
The next couple of years were going to be a crazy ride.
Yeah, totally. So basically, these guys gave me literally a wire over the wall top down into my office, and it was an RS-422 serial connection, and it was a 115 kilobaud connection to the internet, which of course at that time was like, you know, Fat City, you know.
Yeah,
that was
115K, because what was the fastest modems back then? Were 56?
Well, it was before 56, it was 28.8s.
28.8s, yeah, so that's a nice connection.
So I was like, okay, I'm in there. But basically, I kind of saw how IP networking worked, and I was totally blown away by the fact that you could basically very easily, you know, using this very simple low-level language, TCP/IP, you could just send a UDP packet from any named computer in the world to any other named computer. And I mean, I don't know, for me at least, that was kind of the dream of what you wanted to do with, you know, networking computers. But all of a sudden, you had this public network that just did it for free. Like, you just connected to it. So I was so blown away by that. I wanted to do Second Life at that time. It was actually something I had always been into, this idea of big virtual reality, distributed virtual reality. And I recognized, though, that in '95, even though the network was there, the speeds were so low, 28.8, and the graphics capabilities of the endpoints of all our PCs were so bad back then. So this is a 486 33, you know?
It was starting to get better, though. This is when Doom. Yes.
Totally.
And multiplayer Doom.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which is so awesome.
Right. And I remember using multiplayer Doom over, I connected to a 4-node BBS.
Yeah.
And the BBS had door software that would share the connection, and we could kind of play a multiplayer Doom game over the BBS, over the connection.
Which is such a feeling, right?
Oh, it was the coolest thing ever.
Feeling.
I'm like,
you put on music with your friends, and you're like, this is
so
crazy.
Rad.
Yeah, totally. I remember I had that same emotional feeling, and so that was working. But Doom, as you may know, wasn't really 3D. The thing that was so brilliant that John Carmack did so well was that he kind of faked it. He sort of used these moving sort of 2D surfaces to simulate a 3D environment. It was
interesting. I didn't know
I'm trying to think. I can't remember what the core. I can't remember what the core technology was, but it was very, very clever, and it was a way of doing high frame rate fake 3D at that time, which is beautiful. You know, it's what made Doom work so well. But if you were trying to do a generalized environment that had like curved objects, like a ball or something, or a cup or a chair, you couldn't actually do it at that time at high frame rate. But anyways, so practically speaking, as a young entrepreneur, I was like, I don't think there's any way to make money doing something like Second Life now. And so I basically started looking around, but I was like, oh my God, you know, the internet, I mean, there's going to be millions of things built. So I just hit on working on video compression, because I thought transmitting video over 28.8 modems seemed like maybe possible, and I had this physics background, a little bit of algorithms, I thought that it might be possible to compress video well at 28.8. At that time, there was a thing called See You, See Me. Do you remember that?
I remember See You, See Me.
This guy, Tim Dorsey, I think,
Yeah,
was the guy.
I remember See You, See
who was
Me.
I think he was at Cornell, and he wrote this See You, See Me app, which is designed for the Mac.
That wasn't part of ICQ in any way, no.
No, I don't
Something
think
like
so.
that.
I think
Okay.
that was in parallel.
I remember I know that name for sure.
But it was See You, See Me was like a little webcam. So the quick cams, the little ball cameras, were
Right.
just coming out, right, for the PC. And so See You, See Me ran on them, but it really looked terrible. It was like 1 frame every 4 seconds on a 28.8 modem, right? So I looked at that and I said, well, what if you assume that you're looking at a face? Like, what if you assume that, you know, the eyes are probably around here, and you can do it in black and white, you know, to try color. Could you send a high frame rate, say 12 frames per second, over a 28.8 modem and not have it be so algorithmically intensive that it wouldn't compress and decompress on like a 486? And the answer to that was, yeah, you could do it. And so I built this little codec, and then I built a product called Freeview, which was kind of a better version of See You, See Me that was based on this code that myself and then a buddy of mine who actually I studied physics with had worked on. And so the two of us built this codec that was a really good video compressor so this is now 1990, late 95. And through that, we got a bunch of downloads and a bunch of attention. So suddenly I had a new business. And Rob Glazer from Real Networks found us and said, you got to come up here and join my little company, Real Networks, which at that time had just released Real Audio 1 or 2. Real Audio 2, I think, was in beta. So I joined Real Networks, moved to Seattle, and was there for 3.5 years. And that's what I did in between being an entrepreneur as a teenager and starting Second Life.
Crazy. So you were up in Seattle, then you eventually moved back.
Yeah, I was up in Seattle till the beginning of till the middle of 99. And in the middle of 99, there were 2 big things that happened. NVIDIA came out with the GeForce 2, which was the first, you know, really fast GPU that could do 3D, that you could program to it using OpenGL. It was just
Boy, the
really
GeForces
easy.
were awesome, weren't
Yeah,
they? I was so excited to get one.
Yeah, it was like $100 or $200 the cards when they first came out, and Dell started putting them in their consumer machines, which is what and I was like, well, if Dell puts it in the desktop machine that's like $1,000, it's game over.
Right.
You know, by a year and a half from now, everybody's gonna have it.
Right.
And then the second thing that happened was at Real Networks, we were really following the network endpoint connectivity trends. How were people connecting to the internet? And I tell you, in 99, if you were reading the tea leaves, you knew it was game over and everybody was going to broadband. And that it was just a matter of time. It was going to go all the way.
Yep.
So that happened. That big broadband transition happened. And so those 2 things together, I told Rob at Real, I said, I got to go. I got to go start this crazy virtual reality thing. And so that's what I did. And so I started Linden Lab, Second Life, in the end of 99, right after I got back here that summer.
Talk to me about what, you know, you're making a good salary up at Real, right? I assume.
Right, sure, yeah.
Kind of great job. I mean, at the time, amazing company as far as they had a great reputation. I mean, the Real Player Gold, all that stuff. What, were you scared?
Why'd you jump off?
Yeah, why did you jump?
Well, you know, gosh, I had always done entrepreneurial things. I mean, I'd always wanted to like start my own, I guess.
And you saved up cash? Were you like, okay, I've got enough cash?
Yeah, I had
now,
enough money. So I had like Second Life, the first like $1 million or so of which was like the first year and a half of work that we did. I just wrote everybody checks that worked there myself.
Because you had sold your company to Real.
Yeah, well, I had sold my company to Real, and then Real went public while I was there, so I made some money from that. So I was able to finance the very beginning of Second Life myself, although we did get our first investors, you know, like a year and a half in. I mean, Second Life is very much a, you know, a classic kind of entrepreneurial investor venture capital thing. But yeah, you know, it never would have happened if I wouldn't have had a little bit of money to do it, and then just a lot of like, I don't know, I just felt absolutely certain both that some kind of generalized virtual reality was going to happen, that there'd been a lot of attempts at doing it, but again, I looked at them and I was so passionate about the space that I was like, well, I just think the knobs aren't quite turned right. And this can be done, you know, and I tried it.
Yeah, because I think that there's a lot of really what would appear to be easy businesses to start, like things that just need to get done. Virtual reality is one of those areas where I think
why?
Yeah, people look at it and they're just like, gosh, that's a risky business. Yep. That's kind of that's scary territory. Like, there's not, you're either going to make it big or you're just going to flop. There's been. I mean, talk to me about, there was a company called There, right?
Sure, and that was scary.
Yeah.
Those guys had started in, I think, 97. So I started in late 99. And they announced their beta at like the TED conference, I think in either 2002 or 2003. And all our investors and our team, we were totally freaked because they had put they had raised like $50 million to build something that was pretty darn similar to what we were doing with Second Life, and we were just it was pretty scary to I mean, talk about like, it's scary enough to go and try and work on something that's almost impossible and has never worked, but then to have like a serious competitor with totally smart guys.
Right.
One guy who is a distributed computing guy from Stanford, another guy, Will Harvey, who's an amazing guy who had made Pinball Madness, or really, he is amazing game developer, designer. So yeah, it was terrifying.
So talk to me about just what it's like. How do you get talent to get behind your idea? Because I mean, I can imagine you had this idea, and obviously, like many brilliant ideas, they're sitting there in your head, and you're like, hey, we're gonna go start this crazy virtual reality world. Like, how do you get people pumped up enough, talented people, to say, I'm gonna leave my cushy job, my six-figure job, whatever it may be, and join someone that's creating a virtual reality game?
Yeah, I think for most, looking back, most of the early people who came and joined us, especially the developers, were totally devotees of the idea of virtual reality working. I mean, they were all people who had read Snow Crash, and they were all like, what if, and I think for a lot of them, I think there's not a lot of entrepreneurs. You know what? They found me. I mean, it was a crazy enough project. I've always believed, and it's like what I'm doing now, with this place. I've always believed that, and I think this is a little bit of a heretical thought, or maybe it's becoming less so now, there's probably more advantage to being open about what you're doing, especially in the kind of changing conditions that we're undergoing right now, than there is in hiding what you're doing. And so
to attract the right talent.
Like there.com, and I mean, the short story is that we Second Life won against There over many years, but that initial fear at some point turned into elation because we realized, we got it right. And even with $50 million, these guys didn't quite get it right, and the Second Life thing's gonna really run. And, but we were very open about what we were doing right from the start. Like, it'd be like having a conversation like this. Nobody even knew about us or cared about what we were doing at the beginning, but I was willing to talk to anybody who wanted to talk about it in any detail about how we were doing it, why we thought it would work, what our plan was, what we thought the future would look like. And I think because we did that, we would eventually, a video would reach some developer who was sitting somewhere working on something. A lot of the times I'd get people just showing up the door being like, it's finally time for me to come here. And it'd be like developers, who many of them now are good friends, that were just like, I've been thinking about this all my life, and I saw that you were doing it, and if you can pay me a salary, I'm willing to come work here.
That's awesome.
And we got a lot of great people that way. But I don't know, that question of how do you get great talent, I think there are only a few entrepreneurs, and then most everybody still wants to kind of get paid a salary or have a dependable salary and not have something like so horribly risky, like you were saying.
Right.
And I think that's a tough disconnect. And here in San Francisco, right, where everybody wants to, it's almost like the style is to be an entrepreneur. We're all supposed to be entrepreneurs.
Right.
The reality is, psychologically, most of us aren't. And then just a few of us are just kind of crazy for reasons that are, I don't know, unclear.
So how do you, there's, a lot of people that watch these videos, I get feedback all the time, and a lot of the emails that I get are, I got this idea, I want to build this, I want to show it to you, even before they'll take the time to prototype it out or anything like that. They just have an idea in their head.
Yeah.
Is there anything that they can say to themselves? Is there any kind of gut check? Is there any kind of reality check where they can run it against themselves and say, am I really cut out for this or not?
Well, I always say about entrepreneurship, one thing is that if you feel sort of compelled beyond all, reason to work on something. Like if you just feel that regardless of the salary or anything else, you just have to see if this idea will work.
Yeah.
Like you have to see. Like that's when you want to go do it as like a founder,
Yeah.
right? Not necessarily as an early team member, but as a founder, that's the gut check in my mind.
That's a great point. That's where I was with Dig. So when I started Dig, I was making 6 figures at Tech TV, and I was sitting there and I was I thought like, well,
and you were super young.
I was really young, early 20s, and I was sitting there and I was like, parents are proud of you being on TV and all that stuff, getting those calls like, you're doing great. I'm like, I'm gonna leave this job and do this crazy idea. And I don't know if it's gonna work, but if I can pay the rent, I'll be stoked and I'll be happy because I'm paying the rent.
And I bet you must have felt from the Tech TV experience, you must have just had this passion in your heart that the idea of letting a broader crowd, letting everybody kind of identify what wants to be consumed from an editorial perspective, right, was just, there was a certain magic to it, right?
Yeah.
And you felt like you had to see.
Absolutely. I just had to see if it would work. And in worst case, you go back to, if your idea doesn't work, you maybe try something else, and if not, you go back and I'll be fixing computers someplace, and
Well, I mean, I guess it's like almost like you say the gut check. What's the negative gut check for an entrepreneur? I'll tell you what the negative gut check is make more money. Like if your idea is that you're gonna leave a job and start a startup because you wanna make more money, stop.
Right.
Because statistically, you're not going to.
Yeah.
Like you are almost certainly going to fail, But if your feeling is, I don't even care if I fail, I just want to know if this idea works.
Right.
Even if it doesn't work, at least I want to be able to say, well, I tried,
Right.
I was so passionate, I was so curious about it that I tried and it didn't work, and no harm, or at least not in the United States and the culture we live in now.
Yeah.
No harm, but I think that if you feel that way, then do it. If you feel like you just want to, make your job more interesting or make more money, boy, statistically, I'd say that's would be a bad call.
Yep, absolutely. So let's finish up on Second Life, but first, is there anything? I mean, gosh, you grew this to how many employees?
Second Life was like the max. I think the max number of people we ever had working on Second Life was like 325 or something.
That's insane. So
now it's like 250.
How does something I always try and get out of these interviews is that it was really difficult for me taking Dig from 0 to 50 plus employees, just because you run into things you're like, wow, I'm managing people for the first time. I'm dealing with a whole slew of issues when it comes to scaling talent. How did you deal with that? Where did you learn how to manage such a huge team and how to grow a team, how to build the proper culture?
Well, I definitely didn't. I mean, for me, it was a learning adventure. I didn't have experience. When I worked at Real Networks, actually, I was the CTO when I left, and I was kind of the VP in charge of sort of video and then a broader set of things we were doing for a long time.
So you were managing people there then? You had people
I was
to you?
managing people. I mean, I probably had a group of like 100 to 150 people typically that were working with me. But I tell you, I don't really know. I mean, I think that, and this has been some of my adventures over the last year or so, I don't think we know how to manage people, like to build software, especially under the more and more rapidly changing conditions. I don't think we actually know how to do it perfectly yet as a culture. Like, I think that the way people manage software projects is, it works, of course. I mean, we're all making together so much amazing stuff right now, but it still doesn't work. I don't think it's like very refined.
I agree with you, 100%.
Yeah,
things break down. Weird things break down.
Yeah.
There's like deadlines, and you push people too hard, and some people don't work like that, and some people are not 9 to 5 people, and it's really there's so many little things. Yeah.
So I mean, part of my passion has always been, and actually, this was also true at Second Life, that I was really passionate about pushing on that a little bit and saying like, well, how can we do this differently? Is there anything we can do differently? Can we have more transparency? Can we be somewhat more autonomous? Can we have a bunch of autonomous groups rather than a really strict kind of top-down planning process? Mm-hmm. Can we use marketplace approaches more? Can we use bid-ask environments? Can you make the development environment feel more like eBay or something?
Yeah. So tell me what you've built in the last couple of years, or last year and a half, or whatever it has been now.
Yeah, well, there's a couple things. One is this thing that is called the Love Machine, which is from which came the name of my company right now. And that was a system where basically you send these little messages to people and inside your company to recognize them, but the trick is everybody else can see all the messages. So people use it a lot, people send these positive,
recognize them for things
job.
they've done good, the positive.
Recognize them for positive things, not negative. Nobody will do that because psychologically you're never going to send a negative message that everybody else can see. That's unbelievably strange. So we built that, but we kind of knew all about that. So I'll tell you the new stuff we've done. So we built that. We actually made it into a product, the Love Machine, that's available now that we're putting out and putting in other companies, and companies like Yelp, for example, using it internally. They love it. There's good companies starting to play around with it, other than Second Life. The other thing we've done, though, over the last year that's been really fascinating, and I just blogged about this recently, was that we set up a kind of a cross between a more granular version of like Elance and then an open source environment like a SourceForge or something like that. We sort of hybridized those two ideas so that as a startup, myself and Ryan, the guy that I started this company with, we started building software very quickly, but we did it by chunking everything we were doing into really small pieces using an open code base that everybody could always see, regardless whether you worked with us or not. And then just parceling it out and letting people bid and work part-time on all the little pieces of it. So we ended up, as a startup, we've spent the last year, and we've spent about $400,000 in development costs for software development through this system using like 100 different people around the world. And so it's been a very, very interesting, almost like social experiment in how to build software.
So that totally goes against the grain of everything that you've ever been taught, because everyone says, only have a couple developers on a project or a given piece of code, because if someone else has to jump in there, someone gets sick, they want to be able to understand the code. 100 different developers. How do you make sense of any of the code if something breaks?
Well, the first thing is you've got a whole bunch of people, it's like, imagine, birds flying around and working on your software. I mean, you're one of the birds as a developer. Everybody's got a pretty good overview of it, like an open source project, where there's a lot of people that have their eyes on a lot of the code. And, any good software project that's like, is something you should continue to invest in. I mean, people are willing to kind of stay up to speed on it and read over it, even without charging you for it, you know what I mean? So one thing is that people that have relatively less experience spend a lot of time just putting their eyes on all the code. So when you do need somebody to jump in, or when somebody's sick, you can jump in and do it quickly. I think the other thing is, like, a lot of software, of course, every conventional software development just would throw up on the idea of, oh my God, you've got 100 different people working on a startup project. That's crazy. You're not going to get quality. You're not going to get code quality. But what's surprising is, first off, developers are pretty aggressive about maintaining quality, regardless of kind of how they're working together or being paid. So, one thing is it tends to kind of emerge. Like, people tend to fix stuff pretty aggressively, even when you're not doing a bunch of meetings to complain about this or that, or fight about coding standards or something like that.
Have you had to kick off developers that aren't producing quality code?
Well, the system that we built is kind of like, again, it's kind of a bid-ask system, but with contracts typically being like $150. So think of like 3 or 4 hours of your time. So imagine as a dev, you like come to our website. We call this thing the work list. You come to the work list, you sign up, you give us your PayPal. You look at the source code because you can see all the code. You see me write a contract and put it in there. Pops up on your screen that basically says, hey, can you take kind of this login screen over here and implement it on this app over here, roughly the same thing, put your picture in, upload something. And you say, okay, I can do that. You figure it's going to take me a few hours. You say, I'll do that for $200, guys. I click OK. You get an SMS, that's like, Philip accepted your offer. You start working on it. We give you a sandbox. So everybody's working in a big common sandbox. So you can just work on it, proof it, test stuff, let other people look at it. And we have this cool integrated chat environment. So you can just jump in there and be like, hey, does anybody know where the configuration for the database is? And somebody will be like, yeah, it's in this file.
Gotcha.
So made a very live environment for doing that. So it's just that you can just quickly get in, do something, and make money. And we're doing that, 10 times a day, 10 little tiny contracts.
That's awesome in that one of the biggest challenges I know a lot of people have is just finding a developer to work with. And then you're always having to ask yourself, like, is that one developer the person I should be working with?
Right.
Is it like,
is that the
you're
one,
kind of like
dating.
Yeah, you're dating or getting married to that person and their code quality for the lifespan of your app. In this case, it's kind of it's mitigating risk a little bit by having more developers.
I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, I don't want to piss people off, but it also deals with a lot of ego issues, which is pretty interesting. I mean, anytime I view software as fundamentally a pretty creative activity. Like you say, like, is it more like working in a factory? Is it more like being creative? I mean, especially nowadays, it's pretty creative. In other words, creativity is defined as something where there are many, many solutions that achieve one result, right? Like that's painting, right? I tell you, like sunset canvas, please make sunset. Well, the reason that painting is an art is because there's a lot of different ways you could do that, right? Ditto with programming, right? There's a million different ways to solve even the simplest, form validation problem, you know? So since it's a creative act, I think that there's a huge amount of opportunity for thinking about the social engineering of how to manage people that are engaged in that, right? So like one of the negative sides of things is that it's so easy to put your own ego into the code you've written, you know? But what happens with our system is, because we've broken everything up into these little tiny chunks, we're not afraid to like roll stuff back or just give up. You know, we can wander aimlessly in a design direction and then totally back out of it quickly without anybody being mad, you know, which is so different than when you've got that classic startup situation, which I know too, you know, where there's 5 of you and you're
spent
in
the
this
last
little
6 months
space.
working on it.
Yeah, you know, and then your guys are all looking at each other, like the guy who wrote the code is demoing it and you're standing behind him and you're looking at each other and you're like, and you both know like it's bad, you know? Not that he didn't write bad code, but like this thing just sucks. This idea doesn't work. What do you do, right? I mean, that's tough. So one of the things we wanted to do is build an environment where we could do experiments like that and where the social nature of the environment would make it less painful to do that, to just say, let's just stop.
That's awesome.
So I think that that's a huge win. And I guess what I would say is the code quality of what we've written, I mean, you can, people watching this can go check it out. Is the code quality of what we've written as good as like some amazing, framework-driven, fantastic world-class developers working on it? No, it's not. Does it really matter though, as a startup? Not that much. I mean, I've done a lot of startup work and the stuff we're writing is reasonably solid. The very fact that 25 different people can work on it and contribute without being totally stuck, right? That means it's got good code quality. Like that's the definition of code quality.
Could you write
can a new guy work on it?
Could you write something that would need to scale in a big way? I mean, do you think that you could basically, today, could you start Second Life inside of this? Using this
I think you could, but I do believe that the people writing the contracts, we call them like the runners, so that's like me and 5 more of us, you've got to make kind of good design decisions up front. You know what I mean? So
as far as the architecture.
So you want to write a contract that says, write me, a lookup routine that uses a table that's a big table, and you know what I mean?
Right.
Like you've got to kind of set the developer in the right direction.
Right.
And then I think you can write stuff that's scalable. If you used our system, and we're about to start recruiting people who want to do projects in our system to do it, I think what we're going to find out is if you have like no development experience, and you're just writing down like, I'd like a system that stores menus online so that people can find cool recipes. And I mean, if you start at that high level, you probably might get code that wouldn't be very scalable. But you don't have to be that way. Like I'm not. What we're doing with our projects now. I'm obviously I have a big eye towards scalability. So, I'm writing little contracts that kind of embed that design inside it.
That's
like
awesome.
do it this way.
Right.
Use an index here. Use 2 tables, not 1. You know what I mean?
Yep. You kind of need that PM or that person overlooking the project that can help set the architecture. So cool. So tell me about the space. I mean, first of all, we haven't said a thing about it. We've been sitting here behind all this construction and everything.
With this
nice Elmer's glue, which I used to love to consume as a child.
You were telling me that.
Yeah.
Well, you know what we're doing here? This idea that I said of people working together online. We've spent this, year and 100 people building our software. So now we're embarking on a new software project, and we need more people, and we're going to scale it up as a business. And so rather than getting a conventional office, what we figured we'd do is get a cafe and turn it into a working cafe where you can come and work here, whether or not you're working for our company, and do software development. And so we're going to build this little cafe space. There's going to be a couch over here. There's going to be high tables along the window here. We are at the palatial intersection of Market Street and Octavia, which is kind of in this upper market area. It's super good in terms of transportation.
If people don't know this area, you're not from San Francisco, this is super central. This is
and
like
you
the
live,
place to
you know,
be. I live like 2 blocks away.
Yeah.
So it's awesome. It's a great hop to anything around the city.
Yeah.
So you guys got to, and I tell you, I was across the street having sushi yesterday.
At the little place, right? Which is totally backed up at 5 o'clock.
And I was like, who has that place? That's an awesome space. I was thinking like, that'd be good. And then I looked online today to find out where to meet you, and I was like, holy shit, that's his place. So it's awesome. It's great.
Yeah. So we're going to turn it into a cafe, and the way we're going to hopefully make it work, right, is we're going to basically say, if you're a developer and you kind of tell us who you are, you can come and work here, no problem. And what we're going to try to do is play around with transparency and new systems. We're just going to make some sort of a contribution system where you can just give us a little money to hang out here. Come here, work here, use our projectors, you know, maybe we'll have some machines. We'll certainly have fax machines and printers, and we'll have coffee, maybe we'll have a little light food as we go along, and you know, all that stuff will just be open to everybody, and we'll just try to kind of convince everybody to throw a few dollars in a jar once in a while to help us keep this open, and hopefully if it's a good idea, you know, we can do it at more locations.
Can you talk about any of those ideas yet, of how you're going to get the donations and stuff?
Oh, sure. I mean, like one of the ideas we had was, let's say you are like a student, right, and you're a great web designer. There's lots of those here in San Francisco, and you would just like to hang out and study in a place like this, you know, I mean, a place like this is going to be, not as it looks right now.
Sit on the couch, chill.
Sit on a couch, hang out, get your laptop, you get some power, you get good Wi-Fi. You know, we're going to have great, you know, Wi-Fi here, you know, highly technical, that's never going to be down. So, but you do a little bit of pickup work for everybody once in a while. So I'll walk over and I'll be like, hey, Kevin, you're the guy, you're the web designer guy, yeah, right? Can you just like do this, like take a look at this for us and do a little touch up on it? You do something for us. One of the things we're thinking of is we'll have a mechanism where I can just quietly walk back to my desk and like give this place, the club, this sort of work club, a little money to like cover your time here, you know? So one thing is you can just sit here. The other idea we have is—
So people donate on your behalf, basically.
Yeah, people could donate on your behalf.
For helping out.
Yep.
For helping out the space in general.
And then the other idea is, what if we put all those donations and a picture of you and like what you do well, what your skills are, what if we put those on a projector on the wall when you're here?
I love that. That's so cool.
So that's one of
the
big
basically
ideas.
You walk in to get your coffee, you look up on the wall and you're like, okay, there's 3 web designers here, 2 developers, and I'll go talk to that person because they're available. You could actually have it like set their availability, whether they're busy or available, and like a little green icon means you can walk up to them and talk to them and just be like, hey.
It's so funny you say that because we were thinking about getting some little lights that had like a red and a green light and actually doing that. And we're gonna put like little one person, you know, like right over there, it's gonna be all one person, and then there's gonna be a couch, there's a table over here, and then there's a second floor up here where we're gonna put more tables and workspaces.
What a great way to meet new people too. Like just that are starting something new. That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's what we're gonna try.
Well,
I mean, our hope is
I'm gonna be here on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's right. You said you're gonna go. So
absolutely.
There you have it. See,
for sure.
It's got to work a little. Yeah.
Cool. So any other ideas? I mean, one thing I wanted to touch on for like 2 seconds is that I always ask everyone at the end of the interviews to name one thing that they would always take with them anywhere, any new startup, something they've learned over the years, one like guiding principle, and then also one thing that they would never repeat again that they just really screwed up, and would want to pass that on, that information on to someone so they don't screw up in the same way.
God, man, I don't know. Like one thing, don't spend a lot of money. I mean, I think that, man, I've never seen a big idea combined with a big budget work. Mm-hmm. Like you talk about all this entrepreneurship we're talking about, you know, it's like every time you really get invested in and you put a lot of money and effort into like a new feature or an idea, you know, like in Second Life or something like that, it makes it fail. It's almost like you want to, you know, find out quickly what works and doesn't work. But that's a bit trite. That's kind of everybody's thinking about that nowadays.
What do you mean you just like get stuff out as quickly as possible and see how people react to it?
Yeah.
That kind of thing?
I think transparency is the one thing that, I was saying it earlier, you know, I mean, and I think this is where maybe there's like some value to people that might be listening to this in terms of the way I approach this stuff a little differently. There's just always a win to transparency, and it's so hard to believe that. Like,
it's
as a
scary.
human, we're naturally
for
like,
sure. I have like 5 ideas I don't want to tell anybody right now because I'm
I've got one I don't want to
guarding
tell you. It's like, but then you think like, really? You know, you're the only one crazy. I mean, I always think like, you're the only one crazy enough to go after your own ideas. And if you're not, you may not be, and you're trying to be an entrepreneur, you may not be thinking fast. You may not be thinking far enough out. You know what I mean? So I think that just telling people about what you're doing, and this totally applies for, you know, a new startup with a new strategy. Like if you're doing a startup today, just to the level of where it hurts, tell everybody, that your team that you're working with, put all the cards on the table so you guys can all see what's going on and what you're doing.
It's funny, when we were doing Dig, I thought about this so many times, but I never did it. I wanted to have like cameras in the conference room when we're debating features out and we're talking about them. That would be so
and
cool.
Let everybody,
and you could tune in and you'd be like, okay, every Tuesday at 3 p.m. it's feature debate day. And everyone tunes in and they're like, you know, you're talking about this, and you could give them like a little thumbs up or thumbs down.
Right?
And you could record the video and like they do on the presidential debates, you could watch and see what people really like.
You know what's so funny? I'll tell you, when we started Love Machine a year ago, that was one of the things we built. We built a thing that we laughingly called the bullshit meter, which was exactly that. It was exactly like a meter that was summed, you know, so everybody that was online or in the meeting themselves with their iPhone under the table could be like, I don't know.
It's like, no,
you know?
That's stupid.
When I was CEO at Second Life, one of the things I did that I really do believe in, and I would suggest this to everybody, or I would ask every entrepreneur that says no, they wouldn't do this, why you say no, which was every quarter at Linden Lab, for a number of quarters when I was CEO, when we were pretty big, I used to send out a SurveyMonkey survey, totally anonymous, and I used to send it out and I share the results with everybody the next day, and it had 3 questions. The first question was, do you want to keep me as a CEO or get a new one?
Oh, wow.
The second question was, regardless of what your answer to the first question is, do you think I'm getting better at my job or worse?
Wow.
And the third question, and then the third question was just a text box. So this is a half-page survey, right? Short survey, easy to fill out, you know, so almost 100% participation,
and
as
all
you can
anonymous
imagine.
And everything.
All anonymous, completely anonymous. And the third question was just a text box that said why.
Wow.
And I used to go home.
Did that hurt?
Oh yeah. So 24 hours later, well, not only that, but I used to tell everybody
Every
at work.
CEO should do that.
And exactly, why wouldn't you? Like, what's the argument why you shouldn't?
Right.
And yet no CEOs do. And the why thing. So a day later, I would send everybody the link to the graph of what the percentages were. You know, what percentage of people said they wanted to keep me, and what percentage of people said I was getting better at my job, right? But the best thing I would do is I used to tell everybody at the company, folks, the important thing here isn't my absolute scores, because they were pretty good, you know. I mean, I was a well-liked CEO. I said, what's really important is the trend line.
Yeah, totally.
I used to say to everybody, because someday this company will outgrow me in some way, you know, where it's time for me to go, you know, and I won't want to leave.
Yeah.
But you'll have the numbers.
Yeah,
you know?
it's good for
These
you to know
numbers will
that
be
too,
trending
actually,
down.
to be honest, like to look at that and be like, you know what, the last 6 months I haven't done my job, I'm declining, maybe it is time
by
for me to
the
go.
way, the text, you know, for those who want to do this, by the way, if any CEO out there watching this wants to do it, you know, give me a call and I'll help you set this up on SurveyMonkey. It's pretty easy. The third part, the text answers, I wouldn't share those with everybody so that everybody would be totally honest with me. I would go home, pour myself a drink, and sit down and read them through. And I'll tell you, that was the thing.
Sometimes a second drink, depending
That was
on
the thing that was so sobering. Always a second drink. Because what would happen is, there's nothing like seeing 7 people that don't know each other in your organization use almost exactly the same critical sentence on you. Because you know what? You can explain your board members' opinions away. What I mean, you see what I mean by that? You've worked with a board member for a long time and they say, hey, Philip, you're a micromanager. You know, you leave the meeting and you're like, that's just Jed. He just says I'm a micromanager. You see 7 people that don't know each other and don't know you that well,
Wisdom of the
say,
crowds.
you know, you're a little bit of a micromanager. You put your head in your hands because you just realize, like, that's truth. There's you know, I can't explain that away by saying that person is just kind of, you know, oh, I know his personality. He would just think that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, wisdom of the crowd.
Dude, always great hanging out.
Yeah, it's great to hang out with you. Come and hang out here.
Yeah, absolutely. So give me a couple URLs real quick to throw out there for people that want to learn more about what you're doing, your project, stuff like that.
Sure. So to learn everything about what I'm doing now, the URL to start with is Love Machine Inc. LOVE Machine INC.com.
Awesome.
That's the place to check out.
Cool. Thanks.
Cool.
See you soon.
Great.